Tonight's show is coming to you from the Constitutional Court. The reason we're here in this very special place is because 20 years ago, former President Nelson Mandela signed our Constitution into law. The Constitution's done a great deal. People always talk about it. But there's also many people who feel, well, has it done enough? How much has it acted as a force for changing the lives of ordinary South Africans? Well, over the next hour, we're going to find out.
So many questions we need to ask about that Constitution. What difference has the Constitution made to our country? What difference has it made to you? Good evening, everyone. We have with us an audience of people here. We are in the foyer outside South Africa's magnificent Constitutional Court. And I just want to, before I introduce the guests, take a brief moment to describe to you what I can see, apart from an audience of interested and interesting people. Behind me is the court itself. There are beautiful pillars. There are many things here that are new. But one of the most important and most wonderful features of the Constitutional Court is the things that are old. Woven into the construction are bricks from a place that was once a prison and walls that once kept people inside, people who were fighting for the liberation of the country. And it's not an accident that we're having this conversation in this place, because as much as our Constitution marks the progress we've made as a democracy, we are constantly reminded every hour, every week, every month of every year that the past still hangs heavily over our country. And it's in that spirit that we have our conversation tonight. Joining me here, we have three guests who are going to be sitting on the panel with us. First of all, let's say good evening to Gauteng Premier David Makhura. Premier, thanks very much for giving us your time tonight. Joining us as well, we have veteran activist Joyce Siroke. She's held many positions, served on the Transvaal Board of the National Coordinating Council for Returnees, was on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, chaired the Commission on Gender Equality from 1999 to 2007. Ma'am Joyce Siroke, thanks very much for giving us your time tonight. Okay, I'm just going to remind our guests to speak into their microphones, please, because in addition to the audience here, you have a radio audience, and they all want to hear what you're saying as well. Finally, joining us is Advocate Kevin Malunga in his position as Deputy Public Protector. He's no stranger to this court and the issues, some of them at least, that get canvassed by the judges in the doors just behind us. Advocate Malunga, welcome to you, and thanks a lot for your time. Premier Makhura, I want to start with you and share with you a comment posted on the Today with John Perlman Facebook page, where Izwelethu says the Constitution protects white privilege. The previous regime used utter brutality to disenfranchise, but now we can't initiate proper redress because things are unconstitutional. Whether you agree with Izwelethu or not, do you agree that a large number of people are not necessarily persuaded that this Constitution is an agent for transformational change?
Well, firstly, I would like to say, John, commend the organizers of this conversation, which includes the Katrada Foundation and Constitutional Hill and Kaya FM for this. This is very important for our country, especially the participation of young people, because the future belongs to them. The Constitution cannot be defended by those who crafted it. Its real meaning must be found by those who see it and feel the impact it is making in their lives. There's no doubt, I agree with the old man, I call him the old man, Albie Sachs, that the Constitution has bequeathed unto us very strong institutions. And these institutions get tested all the time. They must prove their mettle in practice.
Izwelethu would not agree with you.
From that point of view, I want to deal with the institutions first. Strong democratic institutions. Human beings can always mess up institutions because they are human beings, so they may have their own intentions, but these institutions are proving their mettle. That's one important thing. Rule of law, strong democratic institutions. The Constitution also is an aspiration. Young people were debating here. Our Constitution is aspirational. With regard to full human dignity, equality, freedom, That's an aspiration. It's something that we should strive to achieve. We're not there yet. And Isoletus complained, I would say that the Constitution doesn't stop that the Bill of Rights, which is the most far-reaching about socio-economic rights. Those rights are enshrined in the Constitution. Their realization, yes, is a function of actions that should be taken in government, but I would also say through mobilization of active citizens, the civil society. The Constitution cannot make people just equal.
Yes.
There are a number of things that we will have to do in practice to realize those rights. I wouldn't agree with him that it prevents transformation. If you read the Constitution deeply and meaningfully, it's the most powerful instrument for transformation. But the actual actions have to be taken by organized. The Constitution can't confer equality, and it is that way. There has to be action by government, there has to be action by civil society, and those feeling excluded have to use the Constitution as an instrument to advance their cause. But there's no perfect Constitution in the world. The Constitution would be as good as it spells out what type of society we would like to be. So you wouldn't find a perfect Constitution, because
Yes.
it also represents what you would call the balance of forces at each given moment. So a negotiated settlement, but I don't see in the Constitution any obstacle truly to us realizing the dream of a South Africa we want. That has
Yes.
to be something we mobilize, organize about, and it can't be the action if civil society sits and watches, citizens sit and watch and expect that dream to be delivered by government. It will be a fundamental mistake.
Joyce Soroke, even if there isn't an acceptance in this room that the Constitution protects privilege and doesn't transform societies, is there not a danger that some people feel that this is perhaps an empty document, as they don't feel their own lives change against the promises of the democracy made so many years ago?
Yeah. Like the previous speaker, I would also like to say this is a wonderful day, and I'm very, very happy to see so many young people around us, because for me, they are the hope for the future. We've done our part. You see how old we are now. And they must protect this democracy. And the only way of protecting this democracy that so many people fought for is to know and understand the Constitution. And I've always felt that the schools, our universities, don't deal with the Constitution. It should be embedded in the curriculum so that when these children study their maths and other things, they begin to know about the rights and how to go about getting those rights. Because what we see now is that they have not been empowered to be responsible to see how they can maintain this democracy. So I feel like Albi says, we've done a lot through the Constitution. We come from an era where people suffered gross violations of human rights. And that process was changed over and transformed into a country that was promising national unity and reconciliation. But 20 years on the line, we have made a few steps back. And that is my fear. And we are losing the gains that we made through the Constitution. And the crafters of this Constitution were wise to say that something that is on paper must be bolstered by action. Hence, for me, the Chapter 9 institutions. They were embedded in the Constitution to protect those human rights. And if people feel the Constitution is not doing anything for them,
Yes.
it is because those institutions are now being compromised.
Let's just get the thoughts of the third of our guests who didn't get a chance before the break, Deputy Public Protector, just to reintroduce Advocate Kevin Malunga. Advocate Malunga, what do you think the Constitutional Court and its deliberations and its decisions have done for either good or ill for South Africans' sense of the law as a possible instrument in their lives? It's been a place where courts have been cases have been highly publicized, closely watched, but the overall development of a society that trusts in the law, what has the Constitution contributed, if anything, to that over 20 years?
Thank you to John and the listeners. The Constitutional Court, the interesting thing that it has done is that it has affirmed the rule of law in South Africa. That you recall that the Constitution says courts are the final arbiters of disputes. In other words, this is not necessarily a country of big men. It's a country of big institutions. So that's what the court has affirmed. In other words, smallest person. Remember when the Chief Justice spoke about David and Goliath?
Yes.
Yes, the smallest person can get a remedy from this very court. And it has happened many, many a time. In RDP, you recall the Grootboom case. It was decided in this very court where the right to housing was affirmed. And of course, our powers as the public protector have been affirmed in this very courtroom right next door. So I think the idea that President Mandela, for example, mentioned that let's not trust human beings too much. Let's have checks and balances to ensure that when they make mistakes, there are institutions that can remedy that. And that's what the Constitutional Court and other courts, ourselves, do.
Okay, we've got people who are with us in the audience who want to join in, so do tell us your name and share your thoughts, ask your questions. Over to you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Tami Ukwe. I'm from Freedom Park. I appreciate the feeling that has been shared by our elders. However, I have a different feeling, which I think it informs the feeling of the majority of us, especially those that comes from the black working class communities. I do feel that this constitution is a constitution that was really based on the serious compromises with respect to the liberation struggle of our people. It does not reflect the interest and the aspirations of the black majority. It actually protects the interest of those that stole land from us. For instance, if you speak the property law, it guarantees property law. And the fundamentals of our struggle was to return back the land. And the Constitution prevents us. It makes us not to be able to reclaim the land that has been taken from us. Number two, the lockout clause that actually prevent workers to have a meaningful strike. In fact, I believe that it is that lockout clause that is responsible for the massacre that happened in Marikana, because it says the workers must be some meters away from their working place. As a result, they cannot have a meaningful strike, like for instance, sit in or go slow in their working places, and that makes the bosses to be the ones that benefit from the strikes, because they can be able to employ the scrap labor while the workers are on strike. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tommy. Let's get another contribution. Yes, ma'am. Tell us who you are and share your thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tandos Bongseni Kumete, and I'm the creator of a women's empowerment show called The Bashumi Show, which aims to emancipate all women across the African continent. The show teaches women their rights and their entitlements, especially after hearing that women on a daily basis have their land, for example, taken away from them because it is believed in those communities that women are not allowed and are not supposed to inherit land. So, Mama, my question to you, Mama Joyce, is why is it that after more than 2 decades of a democracy, we are failing to realize gender equality in this country? We only prioritize human rights where there is a direct economic impact, but we do not prioritize issues that relate to women. Girls and women are raped on a daily basis. We recently had a rape at Wits University, which is only one of many rapes. Women's land or women's rights and entitlements are stripped away from them on a daily basis. Where are we failing and how can we do better in this regard?
Great, thanks. So, Premier Makura, can we get you to respond on the land question? Because it's an issue that comes up a great deal in regard to the Constitution. Over to you, and grab your microphone so everybody can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. I think one of the important things we should move away from is to believe that we can inscribe the future, and the future is cast in stone. All we can do in a constitution, for a document, a constitution, is we can spell out what kind of country we want to be, but realizing that it's something that needs to be worked for. The actual translation of every right that is in here, including women's rights, including the right to land. I do not, for one, believe that it is the Constitution that prevents us from realizing that. So, in that way, I'm saying both because the Constitution spells out very, very clearly that land restitution is something that we can do, including for purposes of redress. And we have done quite a lot. We are not where we are. If you just talk also about the rights of workers, the right to strike is not something that you can take away from workers. That right itself is enshrined in the Constitution. So there are certain things I don't believe that we think they must be solved in the Constitution, which must be solved in the Constitution. It's institutions, it's policies, which are instruments, but it is also actual processes of governance. If we were to be tempted to want to put every area that we may feel quite unhappy about in the Constitution, we still have, beyond putting it there, we still have to have the actual instruments to do that. And that includes also, as I say, I want to emphasize, it includes mobilization of society for us to get. The rights that are in the Constitution are aspirational rights. To get them realized, it's an important struggle that Ma'am Joyce and her generation have, what they have helped us to do in adopting the Constitution is to put those rights in the Constitution. No one can take them away. What I believe my generation and the young people who are here, what is our task? Our task is to achieve that aspiration. And that aspiration should be something that we build new institutions, new organizations around the fact that it's no longer unlawful, it's no longer illegal to strive for a South Africa that's in our Constitution. But to get there is something that we have to work for. The struggle is not over. And the struggle can't be over by trying to cast everything in the Constitution. The actual struggle must continue, because the temptation for others to feel we are okay with what is there will always be there, including the temptation for institutions to be undermined or destroyed will always be there.
Yes.
The temptation will be there, but we must, I would like us to invest in a more organized and mobilized society to realize the vision that is espoused in the Constitution, including organizing workers, including organizing women, including organizing every sector of society to achieve that vision. So we can't substitute organization and struggle for having everything written in the Constitution. It will remain a dream. Every dream has to be worked for. And that's the key thing. The next struggle for us is to work hard to realize that dream, including ensuring that we have accountable government.
Joyce Soroke, a specific question asked of you. Thando believes that very little has been achieved in terms of gender rights and a better society for women. Your thoughts on that?
I totally agree with her. There is still a long, long way for us to achieve gender equality in this country, in spite of all the gains that we made. South Africa has signed many international laws that support women. We have crafted laws that are supposed to protect women. Domestic Violence Act, the Maintenance Act, and you have it. I can mention a number of things that were done, but we still, up to now, have a very, very high rate of gender violence in this country. In fact, we are the highest in the country, I understand. Well, we are also a very patriarchal society, and patriarchy is also one of the issues that are drawing women back towards gender equality. And there's also an understanding that it's only the women who must fight for their own rights. We have special days of Women's Month. We are right now in the 16 days of activism against violence. But what do they achieve? After that, it's back to the same. I think what we lack in our country is how we promote the very laws that we have made, how we educate people about the respect for women. And like I said, there should be the Constitution in the curriculum. Our schools must also work hard to educate our children, because our children are socialized in a different way because of patriarchy.
Yes.
A child grows up being told that a boy, you are the master of your home. It's the girls who must do, who are subservient and so on. And those things we thought were things of the past, but they still happen now. And because we don't have a system that pushes all the rights that we have to say enough is enough. So the struggle is still on. And I think one of the ways is that we must question all the time and be aware of these issues and not sit back and leave it to the women to dance when it's women's rights or it's Women's Month and so on. This is a problem for all of us, because without women being respected, we will never, ever enjoy our full rights in this country.
Advocate Malunga, I think people get confused because they get told that we have this all-powerful constitution that is the finest in the world, but when they ask why the rights enshrined in the constitution are not being realized, they get told, well, that's another struggle. That has to be done by government, people must mobilize, etc. Don't we need to be clearer with people about what the constitution can do, but much more honest and straight with people about its profound limits?
Absolutely, John. The Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, and I'd encourage people to read it, speaks about progressive realization. And there wasn't an assumption that everything would just land overnight. But to be fair to the government, it has done well over the past 20 years or so. But where the fault line lies is the ugly scourge of corruption, for example, which we have a direct mandate over, which tend to eat into those gains. And of course, other behavior that tends to set that momentum backwards. But I think certainly, if we were to say, is South Africa a better place now than it was in 1994, I would probably say yes.
Should that be the benchmark, given what a terrible place it was before?
No, not so. No, but what I'm saying is the Constitution is working. And these institutions, as I alluded to earlier on, are actually the insurance of the country. They are the protection of the country from impunity, as it were. So that is something to celebrate as 20 years comes through. And obviously, I suspect that it's a time for reflection to look at where are the successes and where are the failures. And some of the challenges that you are referring to are things like litigation is so expensive. This getting in here, if you don't have money,
Yes.
is difficult. Which is where some of us come in as the public protector, because we do what we do for free. We render justice for free. So that's the other thing where I think the state probably needs to come into the picture again, just as it's supposed to come in under the fees must fall issue.
Taking some points from the floor. Good evening. Tell us who you are and share your thoughts.
Hi, my name is Lebohang Keku, and allow me to put you inside the mind of a young person. Many of us have heard the line, the Constitution aims to address the inequalities of the past. Well, a young person believes that the Constitution condones the inequalities of the past. I don't believe that the people who wrote the Constitution back in the day believed that in this day, this age, that the question of white privilege will rise, that the question of land will rise, gender equality will rise. So you cannot blame young people for questioning the Constitution. We must question the Constitution. There is something wrong with the Constitution. If there is a bigger issue, and that is public accountability. Our leaders don't know how to be accountable for their actions, and that reflects badly on the Constitution. It is quite easy for someone to say, I cannot fault the Constitution. It's clear, it's simple, it's a good document. But then why isn't it applied properly? Why is there a disconnect between what the Constitution says and the implementation of the Constitution? Our leaders. There is poor political accountability on our leaders' sakes. And I will make a very recent example with our president, on which I must state with our president, there was a vote of no confidence. I will not get into that. That was just where I will leave it. But that's where the young mind is. That is why issues such as fees must fall are rising. It is because we do not have good leaders. And if we don't have primary good leaders, secondary good leaders, we need to go back to the president. He must be doing something wrong if we don't have good leaders at low level. Thank you.
Okay, let's get another point.
I'm a forest from UCT. I think as long as we live in occupied Azania in this settler colony masquerading as a state, we can't say that we've decolonized. I mean, if so late into our so-called democracy, there's still such a synonymity between race and class. It's resulted in a situation that we refer to as the post-apartheid South Africa. Post-apartheid meaning after 1994, but the socio-economic situation right now still reflects the same situation as pre-1994. So we are asking the question, is not only do we reject the South African Constitution in terms of the Freedom Charter, which doesn't take into account the land question, but is it possible at all to create a racially inclusive South Africa or racially inclusive country from South Africa that was built to basically instill and maintain white supremacy? South Africa is basically a construct of subjugation, because racial subjugation is the basis on which the country is formed on. So you cannot say you want to build a racially inclusive society and still call yourself South African when South Africa itself didn't mean for black people to be citizens in this country.
So what would you change in the Constitution?
The land question needs to be addressed. The South African Constitution makes absolutely no strides toward reparations for black people who have been dispossessed. Black people. In fact, South Africa was made from a union from, as you know, the states of Transvaal and the Orange Free State. And the Constitution of Transvaal actually said in it that the South African citizens, meaning the white settlers, had absolutely no intention of reaching a racial parity between the native black population. So if you have that as your point of departure as a country, can you really reform such an institution, such a state?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the question of leadership, Advocate Kevin Malunga, give your thoughts on that. I mean, to what extent do institutions fail around the leadership deficit that the first speaker was highlighting in his point?
I think because of our mandate, I'm going to be quite careful how I answer this one, because
we will protect you.
We don't want to preempt anything. We give everyone a fair hearing and assume that they are innocent of anything that they're accused of. So I think what has happened, John, is the absence of consequences. I think people are not born innately bad or innately corrupt or born with impunity. I think it is the systems that create them. That people are not born racist, for example. They learn it. You learn to be corrupt. I don't think corrupt. So the absence of consequences in terms of saying, when you've got your hand in the cookie jar, what happens to you?
Yes.
What happens to the assets? There's insufficient asset forfeiture. There has been, and this is something that I think even government itself has been talking about. And I can confirm that the Premier sitting next to me has been walking this talk. You have seen him yesterday firing someone for corruption and so forth. So when there are consequences and the state is able to recoup and recover ill-gotten gains and so forth, we may see change here. I think that's where the behavior and attitudes have largely been influenced by the system. So I think we need to see a stronger institutions, stronger NPA, stronger public protector, stronger court, and even the oversight mechanism inside the state itself. Parliament is already on its way there. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's take something else from the floor. I don't know who's got a microphone. Yes, someone has a mic. Tell us who you are. Welcome.
I am Yola Mafuna from Innovative Youth, which is evidently a youth-run organization that advocates for youth empowerment and self-reliance. From the position of Innovative Youth, we agree with Israel too that the Constitution does indeed protect white privilege and supremacy in a sense. And you might find correlation between what I'm saying and the previous speakers in terms of what the complaints that privilege is too secure in South Africa in this 2016 that we're living in right now. And you might think that it's a coincidence. It is not a coincidence. This is how the masses of South Africa are feeling, and it is probably true.
Yeah.
That the Constitution does indeed need to be amended, and not in a way that is going to still change just the facade. No, we need proper structural change where we can see transformation, and where individuals who implement transformation like the former CEO of ESCOM or the former CEO of SAPC aren't ostracized and targeted by our very own ANC.
Okay, I'd like to give someone else a chance, so please wrap. Thank you very much. Joyce Soroke, we've got a consistent stream of young people saying that they're unhappy with the Constitution. Do you regard that as a problem, or do you regard it as a huge opportunity for the country?
I regard that as a huge opportunity for the country, because the country will begin to address those issues seriously. And I also want to say to the people who have raised this issue about the Constitution, it's not the Constitution that is doing all this wrong. It's the people who have been given the position to implement what the Constitution says, to uphold that Constitution. And we can do that in many ways. Somebody else earlier on talked about our leaders, the leaders who don't have vision, who are not there for the sake of people, who are there for entitlement. So who is to blame? It's not the Constitution. We blame those people who chose those leaders. In my time, John, I would never, nobody else would be chosen to lead in a high position who wasn't qualified, who didn't have the integrity the skills, and the know-how. But today, it seems anyone who is a body can be given a position who is not equipped for that job. And that's one of the reasons we are failing. The people who have been given the right to do all the wonderful things that the Constitution says we should do are not capable, or they are corrupt. So that's my response. So if the young people feel they've lost confidence in the Constitution, that must be addressed, and we should have more platforms of this kind where we could talk with people from different angles to say, why is this Constitution giving the young people this kind of impression?
Let's take one more thought from the floor.
Molweni, good evening. My name is Brian Mazibugu. I have two questions for the Premier Nomama. The first one with Umama. Don't you think when we always push...
Sorry, can I just say, we've only got 3 minutes, so can you make it one question to one person, to the Premier, if you wouldn't mind?
Okay, let me leave the Premier.
Okay, whoever you want to ask, go ahead.
Let me go to Mama. My question is, if we always push everything back to school, there is a proverb in university that says charity begins at home. Because when you are speaking, we are talking about young people. They don't know the Constitution because they are not taught in the university. How about our families? Because the big challenge for me in South Africa, we are always pushing everything back to other people. How about our responsibility as citizens to play a part?
Okay, I'm going to give that one to the Premier. Do you mind? Premier Makura, an answer to that thought from Mr. Mazibuko, and perhaps a final thought on tonight's topic.
Well, I would also like to welcome, as Mayor Joyce has done, that the conversation, and that it's young people who are questioning the Constitution. And that what we should do is to create platforms to have the conversation, including which parts of the Constitution young people say need to be amended. And the big issue is that those things, the rights and the institutions we have defined in our Constitution are so fundamental. I'm saying the rights and the institutions are so fundamental that without them, anyone can do anything and get away with it. So we have to fashion the Constitution, the values. I want to add the values of our Constitution, of human dignity, equality, freedom, rule of law. So the issues that young people are raising, their unhappiness, when the question of land, I would say that we should have a conversation on which are the core things we must preserve. There's no Constitution cast in stone. I also want to agree that possibly when we are disappointed by us leaders, and I want to say us leaders because I'm here in that capacity, when young people are disappointed by us leaders, and when we disappoint young people, they may easily think it is that Constitution, when in fact it's the subjective question of leadership. Leadership is so important to anything in society. So if we may have the best Constitution, we may amend the Constitution and have all the things, we can't substitute for strong and accountable leadership. Without that, I accept that we will not get any of these rights. And that includes at the level of government, but I want to emphasize also at the level of civil society. Because we should never cede the responsibility of leadership just to those in government. If we do that, we will be making a fundamental mistake. Yes, we need very, very strong, accountable, ethical leadership in public institutions, but we also need that leadership in every sphere of society. So leadership is important. So let's have a conversation on which part of the Constitution may need to be reviewed. But I say we must defend the core values, the core institutions, and the the fundamental freedoms and rights that are in our Constitution. Anyone who takes those away, we run a great risk of endangering we have to protect ourselves. I agree, Advocate Man. We must protect ourselves from our own selves. That's what the Constitution must help us do.
Many, many thanks to our panel, Mam Joyce Soroke, Premier David Makura, Advocate Kevin Malunga. Many thanks to the audience. That's it from all of us here on Kaya FM 95.9.